Here's the chord progression to Antihero by Taylor Swift. A beginner plays it like this. A pro plays it like this. Physically, the pro version is actually easier to play. But in order to play that way, you have to unlock a concept called chord inversions. So in this video, I'm going to first give you a brief explanation of that concept, and then 3 steps to becoming fluent with chord inversions. The basic idea behind inverting a chord is pretty simple. Let's take this E major chord, for example. We'll use these same 3 notes, E, G sharp, and B, but we'll just put them in a different order. So I'll leave these notes where they are, but let's put the E up here. We still have E, G sharp, and B, but we've inverted the order of those notes. And now we have a new shape for a chord that sounds very similar to the chord we started with. We can invert it again and take that bottom note, the G sharp now, put it on top. And this is a second inversion of the chord. And if we invert second inversion, we just get back to where we started. And we call this root position. So for every 3-note chord, there is a root position, first inversion, and second inversion. And that's it. So why is this useful? Well, let's take the first 2 chords in this chord progression for an example. If we go from A to E in root position, you can see how far I had to jump. All we have to do to get rid of that jump is put the E chord in first inversion. And now we have a much more efficient movement between chords. And we've also created what's called good voice leading. That's if we were to imagine that every note in the chord were given to a singer. With this version, each of those singers has a nice, simple, beautiful melody to sing. Whereas in the root position version, they all have to jump really far to sing their next note. Okay, so you know how chord inversions work now, and you know why you'd want to use them. But can you find them quickly on the fly? Most of my students who understand this concept still can't quickly find chord inversions on the fly. So I'm going to give you 3 steps for how to practice with these chord inversions and become fluent with them. I highly recommend you practice in the context of a song. So a simple chord progression like this one is great. And the first step is just to take each chord on its own and play through all of the inversions of the chord. So there's A, here's E, and so on. And this is just a first step. This way you will at least be familiar with all of these shapes. But pretty quickly, I recommend you move on to this second exercise because it's actually addressing the skill we care about. We don't so much care about being able to move from one inversion to the next on the same chord. What we really want is to move on to the next chord and quickly find the closest inversion. So for that, I love assigning people this range exercise. What you'll do is take a chord progression like this and make yourself play through it within a 1-octave range. So let's say I'll give this as my highest note and this as my lowest note. I have exactly 1 of every pitch available, which means there's only 1 place I can play each of these chords. A will fit in root position, but E is going to have to be in first inversion. Otherwise, it'll either be too low or too high for my assigned range. Every time you pick a range like this, you'll come up with a specific set of inversions that are really close to each other on the piano. So here are the inversions we get in this first range. If I change the range by just a couple of notes, I'm going to have to come up with new inversions. So now let's say that my lowest note is this A, and my highest note is this G sharp, just below the A, an octave higher. Again, I have 1 of every kind of pitch available, and now I'm going to have to play through the chord progression like this. So you can see how this is a great way to keep mixing things up and force yourself to find nearby inversions on the fly. If you can't already quickly find nearby inversions in a chord progression, I recommend that you prioritize this exercise. What's cool is you only need to do it on a few songs because so many songs share the same chords. And very quickly, as you work through this exercise, you'll start to realize that you're looking for the same shapes over and over again in different songs. And you'll get much more fluent pretty quickly if you push yourself to get through the challenging early stages of this exercise. For step 3, we're going to move beyond this kind of exercise drill mentality, and we're actually going to be doing what professional keyboard players are doing when they choose the inversions for a chord progression. What we'll do now is listen to the top note of these inversions as a melody. So, for example, if I play through this chord progression like this, I hear this melody on top. I like that melody a lot. And so that might become my favorite way of playing through the chord progression. Or maybe I like hearing this melody on top. So what we heard as the melody on top of the chords there was... In this way, every chord progression has a bunch of melodies embedded within it. And as you play around with different potential inversions to use for a chord progression, you'll start to find which melodies are your favorite. Sometimes you might want to echo a melody that you're hearing in the vocal melody for a song. Or sometimes you might just realize that there's a really beautiful way of voice leading through a chord progression that you like better than some other ways which might be correct but might sound a little more awkward. So that's step 3 for any chord progression you're working on. You might move through the range exercise and you're kind of expanding your options to all the possible ways you can play through the inversions for that chord progression. But in step 3, you're going to narrow them back down to your favorite melodies that you hear on top. What I love about this skill and these exercises is that you can be relatively new to the piano, work through these steps, and literally come up with a keys part that is exactly the same as what someone would play if they've been playing the piano for 20 years. There just are only so many ways that you can invert chords and play through a simple chord progression like this. And so even if you are the keys player who is the music director for Taylor Swift's actual Eras tour, you are basically going to be doing these same things to choose the chord inversions for whatever keys parts are getting played. So that's it for chord inversions. Remember to subscribe. I highly recommend you pick up my 2-page guide to every chord symbol if you're interested in learning how to play chords at the piano. My name is Ted, and happy practicing.